careful with some of the nicest people you ever meet. The most disturbing man I've ever encountered wasn't loud, aggressive, or obviously dangerous. In fact, he fit into my life perfectly, too perfectly. And because of him, I learned how easily people can be pulled into something dark without realizing it. At the time, I was part of a close-knit friend group. There were 8 of us, 3 women and 5 men, including me. We had met in high school and stayed friends because we all ended up attending the same nearby college. Other friends used to tell me how lucky I was. Most people drift apart once real life begins, but we didn't. Being around them felt like comfort food. Whenever we hung out, worries about careers, money, and the future faded away. We were all in our mid-20s, and although some of us dated and occasionally brought partners around, those people never truly became part of the group. We had an unspoken rule. The group was closed. That rule changed when my friend Richard introduced us to a man named Francis. Francis was someone he worked with, and from the very first moment, he stood out. He was charismatic in a way I had never seen before. Not loud or clownish, just effortlessly confident. When he spoke, he made you feel like you were the only person in the room. He had this habit of touching people casually, a hand on the shoulder, a light pat on the back. Nothing inappropriate, but very personal. I'm a straight man, but I'll admit there were moments when he made me question things. Well, that's how powerful his presence was. Francis blended into our group instantly, faster than anyone ever had. We liked him more than any newcomer before him, and soon he was joining all of our hangouts. It was refreshing. After years together, our group had started repeating the same old stories. Francis, on the other hand, had endless tales. Running away from home as a kid, sneaking out to see girlfriends his parents hated, getting into trouble and learning from it. He said his rebellious phase ended in college, when he met people who inspired him to live differently. He talked about helping others, about how life was meant to be shared and supported. It sounded idealistic, almost too good, but Francis actually backed it up. When one of our friends, Hannah, lost her job after filing a complaint against a coworker who'd been touching her, we were furious. I suggested finding a lawyer. That's when Francis, who had recently been added to our group chat, typed a message saying not to worry. He knew people. Less than 2 weeks later, Hannah had a new job, better pay, real benefits. She decided to move on and not pursue legal action, and we supported her choice. From that moment on, Francis became something of a hero. Then, Tina needed help moving. Francis showed up with several of his own friends and refused to let anyone spend money. I couldn't help because of my bad back, but I was impressed. Similar things kept happening. In just a few months, Francis had helped nearly all of us in some way. Despite being the newest member, he slowly took on a leadership role. He chose where we went, what we did. At first, we didn't mind. It was a break from routine. But one night, something bothered me. Hannah mentioned craving our usual buffalo wings. Francis suggested a small Vietnamese restaurant instead, saying he wanted to support a local business. I wanted wings too, but I didn't speak up. I felt guilty, like disagreeing would make me selfish. We went with Francis's choice. The food was fine, but Hannah wasn't happy. I joked that we'd eaten wings 1,000 times and it was good to try something new. She cheered up and we forgot about it. I only remembered that moment later, after everything fell apart. Life went on. Ellen introduced us to her boyfriend, but like all partners, he stayed on the outside. A couple of months later, they broke up. Which surprised me. Ellen didn't date casually. Later, Richard told me Francis had uncovered that Ellen's boyfriend was checking out other women and wasn't trustworthy. Frances spoke to Ellen, and weeks later she ended things. Richard said Frances had protected her. That didn't sit right with me. I said Frances shouldn't interfere like that. Richard disagreed. He said it was good someone cared enough to protect the women in the group. I tried to ignore my unease, especially after Frances helped my family when my parents' basement flooded and insurance refused to cover the damage. He found cheap workers and organized financial help. I was deeply grateful. So when Frances suggested his annual glamping trip, none of us felt like we could say no. I hated nature. Hannah did too, but the others insisted. Frances said it would mean everything to him. A few weeks later, we drove 5 hours to a remote forest location. The place was underwhelming. The tents were basic. The beds looked unsafe, at least there were real bathrooms. The girls complained. But Frances calmly reminded them that real camping was worse, and that he'd chosen this spot for their comfort. Looking back, I realize he always responded to criticism by highlighting how generous he was. That evening before lighting the campfire, Frances gathered us in a circle. He said he liked to start trips with a prayer, not religious, just spiritual. Some of us joked about it, turning it into a silly dance. Frances didn't laugh. He quietly went into his tent. Later we had fun, we cooked, told stories, laughed. I slept well. The next morning, Frances announced a deep hike. I tried to opt out because of my back, but everyone wanted to go. Hours later, we reached a waterfall. Frances told us to strip and jump in. I laughed, thinking it was a joke. Then he looked me in the eye and said, I had no choice. Hannah said no. So did Ellen and Tina. Frances grabbed Hannah's arm when she tried to leave, reminding her of everything he'd done for her. That's when the men surrounded us. They pulled at clothes, taunted us. Frances stood back, arms crossed, watching. Then he clapped. The men stripped naked. Frances joined them, chanting his own name, making animal noises. The forest echoed with it. They jumped into the freezing water. We ran. We packed. We left. We never spoke again. Years later, I heard Frances became a motivational speaker. That terrifies me most of all. I truly believed I had won the lottery when I met my boyfriend's family. From the very first day, his mother was warm, welcoming, and eager to include me in everything. Even when I was just the girlfriend, she treated me like I already belonged. My boyfriend's father was quieter, your typical reserved, traditional man, but he was polite and kind enough. Being around them felt peaceful, comforting, almost perfect. Things only seemed to get better when my boyfriend proposed. As I planned the wedding, I invited my future mother-in-law to almost every bridal event alongside my own mother and sisters. She cried when she saw me try on my wedding dress. The speech she gave at our wedding was one of the most beautiful things anyone has ever said about me. My own mother told me I was the luckiest woman alive to have married into such a loving family, especially because my paternal grandmother had been cruel to her my entire childhood. I felt grateful, safe, blessed. For clarity and privacy, I'll use fake names. I'll call my mother-in-law Lucinda and my husband Eric. We're a Caucasian American family living in modern times. No one was especially religious. My husband's family identified loosely as Protestant Catholic but didn't attend church regularly. My own family only went to church for weddings or funerals. There were no cultural or religious differences, no warning signs, no obvious cracks. Looking back, I can't point to one single moment where everything changed. It happened slowly, so slowly that I didn't realize I was in danger until I was already trapped. Eric and I went on our honeymoon to the Bahamas. It was wonderful. We talked endlessly about life, love, dreams, and the future. One thing I made very clear was that I wanted to wait before having children. I was considering graduate school and wanted to focus on my education and career first. Eric was completely supportive. He said waiting was a great idea. We could save money, improve our situation, and plan wisely. When we returned home, we settled into married life. That's when small things began to change. I started doing all the cooking. Eric became messier than he'd ever been while we were dating. He stopped cleaning up after himself. He'd leave dishes around, tell me when laundry needed to be done, and casually ask what I was making him for dinner. I know now that those were red flags. But when you're still glowing from your wedding and honeymoon, you don't notice these things clearly. I was working full-time and researching graduate programs, figuring out applications, finances, and whether I could balance school and work. By the end of our first week back, I was exhausted. That Sunday, I planned to sleep in and do absolutely nothing. That's when Eric told me his parents were coming over for lunch. I asked why he hadn't told me sooner. He said he thought he had, and then casually added that this would be our new weekly routine. Every Sunday, I asked what he meant. He explained that Lucinda had decided we should have weekly family meals so we wouldn't lose touch with daily life. I said I wouldn't have minded if he talked to me first. I was tired. I needed rest. Eric told me that if I didn't like it, I could be the one to call his mother and cancel. I was furious, but I adored Lucinda and couldn't bring myself to do that. I got out of bed and told Eric that if we were hosting, he had to help. He agreed. Lucinda and her husband, Anthony, arrived after I spent the entire morning cooking. Eric mowed the lawn. It was something, I guess. After lunch, Eric and Anthony went outside to drink and talk, leaving me with the dishes. Lucinda volunteered to help, and I was grateful. I felt comfortable enough to open up to her. I told her Eric had become messier and less helpful. She laughed. She said that was normal after marriage. I asked what she had done to change it. She looked at me like I was confused. She told me there was nothing to change. Being a wife meant taking care of your husband. I laughed, assuming she was joking. She wasn't. Lucinda stared at me, completely serious, and said she had spent years caring for her husband. She asked if I was looking down on her. I immediately denied it. I explained that I worked just as hard as Eric and believed we should share responsibilities. That's when she grabbed my arm, not violently, but firmly. Too firmly. She said, marriage only gets harder when children come, and I needed to prepare. She wanted her grandchildren raised properly. I tried to pull away and explain that Eric and I weren't planning on children anytime soon. Her grip tightened. She demanded to know what I meant. I told her I was planning on graduate school. She finally let go, then slammed a dish into the sink so hard I jumped. She went on a furious rant about how I was too old to wait, how women shouldn't prioritize careers, how children would come out wrong if I waited too long. She used words I won't repeat. She told me my degree was enough. My job was enough. Now it was time to focus on family. I was stunned. When she finished, I calmly made tea and asked her to sit down. As I picked up her empty cup, she gently took my arm again and whispered that I shouldn't tell Eric. These were wife worries. That night, I told Eric everything. I told him I wasn't going to live like this. I wasn't going to become a servant. I wanted a partner. If he couldn't do that, I would leave. Eric panicked. He apologized. He promised to change. And he did. But Lucinda didn't. She began showing up unannounced. She brought a family cookbook and made me cook from it. She brought shirts to teach me how to sew. She criticized my cleaning, my cooking, my priorities. One night, she told me she needed to train me. That's when I snapped. I told her I wasn't a maid, I wasn't a dog. 2 dishes didn't define me. She went completely silent, then she left. Weeks passed, then months. Thanksgiving came. At her house, everyone avoided me. Eventually, Lucinda told me the truth. She had sabotaged my graduate school applications. She had contacted my boss. She had turned the family against me. When I got home and told Eric, he sided with her. He admitted everything. I packed my bags that night, I left, and I never looked back. Now I have a real partner, a real life. And Lucinda, not my circus, not my monkeys. On April 18th, 1943, 4 young boys were playing in the forests of Hagley Wood, near Wychbury Hill in Worcestershire, England. They were taking part in an activity known at the time as bird nesting, a common pastime among children of that era, where boys would climb trees in search of birds' nests and collect the eggs they found, often prized for their unique blue and speckled appearances. During their exploration of the woods, the boys came upon a particularly large wych elm tree, a species known to attract nesting birds. Among the group was a boy named Robert Farmer, who was easily the strongest and most confident climber. Because of this, he was the one chosen to climb the tree. He scaled the trunk and carefully moved along the branches, searching for nests to plunder. While climbing, Robert noticed something unusual. The trunk of the wych elm was hollow and extended downward, much farther than he had expected. Curious, he leaned forward and peered into the dark opening. What he saw froze him in place. Inside the hollow trunk was a human skull, still bearing teeth and strands of hair. The realization nearly caused Robert to lose his grip and fall from the tree. But beyond the initial shock, the boys now faced a serious dilemma. Hagley Wood was part of the Hagley estate, and the land belonged to Lord Cobham. They had been trespassing. If they reported what they had found, their parents would inevitably learn where they had been, and the punishment might be worse than whatever trouble they were already in. Terrified and shaken, the boys made the decision to leave Hagley Wood immediately. Pale-faced and silent, they ran home before their parents could begin asking questions. That night, however, the discovery refused to stay buried. One of the boys, Thomas Willett, was plagued by vivid and horrifying nightmares. In his dreams, he saw a woman trapped inside the wych elm, still alive, screaming as the tree grew around her, imprisoning her within its wooden walls. She cried out for help, begging him to save her, but no matter how hard he tried, he could not move. When he attempted to scream for help, his voice failed him completely. Thomas woke up screaming. When his parents rushed into his room to see what was wrong, he broke down and told them everything. He confessed to sneaking into Hagley Wood, climbing trees for bird eggs, and most importantly, to the terrible discovery of a skeleton hidden inside the wych elm. Early the next morning, Thomas's parents went straight to the local police station to report what their son had revealed. Police officers soon arrived at the site the boys had described and examined the hollow tree more thoroughly. Inside, they discovered an almost complete human skeleton concealed within the trunk. Alongside the remains were fragments of clothing and a gold wedding ring still worn on one finger. The skull itself was particularly significant. It still retained a recognizable dental structure and several tufts of hair clinging to the scalp. As officers searched the surrounding area for further evidence, they made another disturbing discovery. Not far from the tree, partially hidden among dirt and leaves, they found the remains of a human hand. It quickly became apparent that the woman's hand had been severed before her body was placed inside the tree. A forensic examination determined that the woman had been dead for no more than 18 months, placing the time of her death around October of 1941. The coroner also discovered a piece of taffeta fabric lodged inside her mouth, strongly suggesting that she had died from asphyxiation. Taffeta is a fine, crisp fabric traditionally made from silk and later from synthetic fibers. It is considered a luxury material, often used in formal gowns and wedding dresses because of how well it holds its shape. This detail raised troubling questions. Whoever killed the woman may have been a dressmaker, or someone wealthy enough to afford such expensive material. Based on the narrow dimensions of the tree's hollow trunk, the coroner concluded that the woman must have been placed inside shortly after death. Once rigor mortis had set in, her body would not have fit. Using the evidence recovered, police were able to construct a rough image of what the woman might have looked like. However, the timing of the discovery made identification extremely difficult. World War II was raging, and countless civilians had gone missing during German bombing raids. Missing persons records were vast and incomplete. Investigators cross-checked hundreds of reports, contacted dentists across the United Kingdom to match dental records, and examined every possible lead. But none matched her unique dental pattern. The woman remained unidentified. Public fascination with the case grew rapidly. People were both horrified and captivated by the mysterious circumstances of her death. In 1944, interest surged even further when graffiti appeared on the Hagley obelisk, not far from where the body had been found. It read, "Who put Bella in the wych elm?" Despite the chilling question, no answers followed. With Britain's resources stretched thin by the war effort, solving an unsolved murder was not a priority for authorities. Decades passed, and nearly 80 years later, the question remains unanswered. Who put Bella in the wych elm of Hagley Wood? Several theories have been proposed. One suggests that the body belonged to a Birmingham prostitute reported missing in 1944, who had actually vanished 3 years earlier. Her name was reportedly Lubella, raising the unsettling possibility that whoever wrote the graffiti knew the victim's identity long before it became public knowledge. Another theory involves a man named Jack Mossop, a patient at Stafford Mental Hospital. Mossop frequently described recurring nightmares in which a woman stared at him from inside a tree. He died years before the body was discovered, but a decade later his wife came forward with disturbing claims. She stated that Mossop had once confessed that he and a friend, while drinking at a local pub, had encountered a drunk woman demanding drinks. After giving her a ride, she became sick in their car. Angry, they carried her into the woods and placed her inside a hollow tree, intending to frighten her. But this account leaves major questions unanswered, particularly why her hand was severed. In 1945, an even darker theory emerged. Anthropologist Margaret Murray suggested the killing may have been ritualistic, linked to an ancient occult practice known as the Hand of Glory. According to folklore, the severed hand of someone who died violently could be used as a powerful magical object. Around the same time, Murray connected Bella's death to another brutal murder nearby, that of Charles Walton in the village of Lower Quinton. Walton was murdered on Valentine's Day in 1945. He was beaten with his own walking stick, his throat cut, and pinned to the ground with a pitchfork. His left hand was severed and never recovered. Detective Superintendent Robert Fabian believed Walton's murder was the culmination of a pagan ritual. Local villagers claimed Walton was a witch who cast curses and kept strange creatures to blight crops. Fabian later stated that both communities were deeply secretive and uncooperative, Whether the two murders are truly connected remains unknown. But one fact remains chillingly clear. Bella's hand was severed, and someone placed her still warm body inside the wych elm of Hagley Wood. In western Norway, not far from the city of Bergen, there is a remote and haunting place known as Isdalen. Translated, it means ice valley. But the valley carries another name as well, Dødsdalen, Death Valley. The name was not chosen lightly. The area is surrounded by steep, sheer cliffs, formations that in ancient times were known among Nordic populations as Ættestupa. According to old traditions, these cliffs were places where elderly members of society, those who could no longer care for themselves and were seen as a burden, were brought to end their lives in a ritualistic act. When the time came, they would be guided to the edge and expected to leap into the valley below, supposedly ensuring a swift and painless death. Sometimes, however, fear took hold at the final moment, and when it did, those accompanying them were said to give a final push to complete the ritual. It was within this grim and foreboding landscape that, in November of 1970, a Norwegian father decided to take his two daughters on a hike. The three followed one of the popular trails on Mount Ulriken, the tallest of the 7 mountains that surround Bergen. Their destination was the restaurant located at the mountain's peak. As they made their ascent, one of the girls suddenly noticed a strange smell in the air, something burning. They were nowhere near the restaurant yet, and the smell made no sense. Curious and uneasy, they began searching for its source. One of the daughters moved ahead, scanning the terrain. When she finally saw what lay ahead, she screamed. At the base of a rocky cliff, among shattered stones and debris, lay the body of a woman. She was positioned face up, her remains burned so badly that she was completely unrecognizable. Horrified, the family rushed back toward the city. The 2 young girls, deeply traumatized, were taken home by their mother, while the father contacted the police and later guided officers back to the location. An investigation began almost immediately. Upon examining the scene, police noticed something deeply unsettling. Scattered around the body were several personal items, all arranged deliberately. Every one of them showed signs of fire damage, indicating they had been exposed to the same blaze that had destroyed the woman's body. The items included jewelry, a wristwatch, a wool sweater and scarf, rubber boots, nylon stockings, a purse, a plastic passport holder, 2 plastic water bottles, an umbrella, an empty bottle of cheap alcohol, a box of matches, and a quantity of sleeping pills. Beneath the body was a fur-lined mat that contained clear traces of gasoline. Even more disturbing was the fact that every single item had been scrubbed clean of personal identifiers. Labels were removed, serial numbers scratched off. Nothing that could identify the woman remained. Several days later, another discovery was made. 2 suitcases were found abandoned at Bergen railway station. When opened, they appeared to be ordinary travel luggage. Inside were neatly folded clothes, cosmetics, and a purse containing multiple European currencies. But once again, something was wrong. All brand labels and identifying marks had been carefully removed. Among the contents was a small notepad filled with strange markings, what appeared to be a coded message. Police quickly determined that the suitcases belonged to the burned woman. An autopsy was performed at Haukeland University Hospital. The results raised even more questions. The woman had died from a combination of factors. Toxicology reports showed she had inhaled a lethal amount of carbon monoxide. Her stomach also contained traces of approximately 60 sleeping pills, far beyond a survivable dosage. However, soot was found in her lungs. This meant she had still been alive when the fire was burning. Additionally, bruising was found around her neck, suggesting she may have been forcefully handled, possibly restrained, dragged, or pushed into the flames. Because her identity remained unknown, tissue samples were preserved. Her jaw was removed due to the unique pattern of gold dental fillings in her teeth. Investigators hoped a dentist somewhere might recognize the work. With no progress, Norwegian police launched a nationwide appeal. Composite sketches based on forensic facial reconstruction were released through newspapers and television. Soon after, staff from the Hotel Hordeheimen in Bergen came forward. They recognized the woman from the sketches. According to hotel records, she had checked out of room 407 on November 23rd. They described her as an attractive woman between 30 and 40 years old, approximately 5 feet 4, with dark brown hair and matching eyes. She claimed to be a traveling saleswoman dealing in rare antiques and artifacts. Hotel staff noted that she behaved strangely. She was nervous, withdrawn, and avoided interaction. One employee recalled hearing her speak German during a rare conversation with another guest. She always paid in cash. At one point, she requested a room change, offering a vague and unconvincing reason. Meanwhile, cryptologists were making progress with the coded notebook. The markings were decoded as a detailed travel log, dates, locations, and movements across Europe. When cross-referenced with hotel records, detectives discovered the woman had traveled extensively under numerous false names, using forged documents, while consistently claiming Belgian nationality. Another hotel later reported a conflicting description, this time claiming the woman was blonde and spoke Flemish. After months of exhaustive investigation and immense resources, all leads went cold. Despite lingering doubts, authorities officially ruled the death a suicide, citing the sleeping pills. On February 5, 1971, the woman was buried in an unmarked grave at Millendal Cemetery in Bergen. Only a few police officers attended. Her secrets were believed to be buried with her, but the story did not end there. Suspicion of a cover-up soon followed, just particularly given the timing, at the height of the Cold War. Many began to believe the woman was a spy. The 9 fake passports supported the theory of involvement with a professional intelligence organization. Other mysterious incidents across Norway during the 1960s, many occurring near military bases, were later linked to espionage activity. Declassified Norwegian defense records revealed something even more chilling. The woman's movements closely mirrored secret testing schedules for the Penguin missile, a powerful anti-ship weapon designed to counter the Soviet Navy. A Norwegian fisherman later claimed he recognized the woman from the sketches, stating he had seen her observing military exercises near Stavanger. Then, in 2005, 35 years later, a witness came forward. A Bergen resident claimed the composite sketch matched a woman he had seen just days before the body was found. He had been hiking Mount Floyen when he noticed her. Unlike other hikers, she wore light clothing and appeared deeply melancholy. For a moment, it seemed she wanted to speak to him, but she never did. Then he noticed 2 men following her. They wore heavy coats and appeared foreign, dark hair, dark eyes. When they noticed him, they stopped talking immediately. The man claimed he reported this encounter during the original investigation, only to be visited by high-ranking security officials who told him to forget what he had seen. Taken together, the evidence points to one conclusion. The Isdalen woman did not take her own life. People who commit suicide do not erase their identities. They do not travel under false names. They do not remove labels from their belongings, and they do not set themselves on fire while incapacitated. Someone or some organization went to great lengths to erase her existence, and they succeeded.